So we had a very nice, interesting, immersive keynote by Ashish. I loved it. A similar question I want to ask the rest of the panelists right now. But before that, I just want to share something that I crossed my mind when the whole future of work thing was put across. And obviously, for very obvious reasons, automation is on all of our minds, right? What's work going to look like in the future? Do we have our jobs? Will automation kill us? Will artificial intelligence wipe out the necessity of all of us to work? All that. And I was going to Forum Mall, and where you have this parking ticket entry area, right? So you punch something, and that arm opens like that, and then you push your car inside, right? I'm used to that in the US, so I was getting to the car and trying to punch the thing when somebody stopped me. No, you don't do it. There's a guy who's doing that for you, right? So despite all this automation, we still have one guy running that thing for us. Okay, that set me thinking: is automation going to be that effective as we're talking about it? So that's probably what I will come to in a little bit. But Ashish shared with us saying that what are the big things that he's seen happening, and there's actually good base for saying that this what will affect the future of work. What we are seeing in terms of technology, what we're seeing in terms of user needs, personalization, everything, that's going to affect how we're going to work. Okay, that's what he said. And what do you guys, one by one, think? What's the biggest thing that's going to happen that's going to affect the future of work?
Does it work? Is it working? Okay, all right. So I think Ashish did a fantastic job of setting the stage for all of us. Thank you. Right? I think he said it all, so I can just say Ashish said it, so it's all done. Right? But I think he brought about a few points that I would just want to re-emphasize on. One is he talked about immersive. And so let's talk about what does it actually mean. Today it's a toy. Let's be realistic. Today when you have one of these funky VR or AR devices, whether Microsoft makes it or someone else makes it, they're all nice pretty toys. Nice for gaming, they're all cool. But the reality is you fast forward maybe 5 to 10 years, I'm not even going more than that, and we look at ubiquitous computing, which is extremely high speed and and the compute becomes extremely low power, because you don't want a big honking machine sitting on your head and burn your head off because you're trying to do some augmented processing there, right? So I think one thing that I see happening big time is that is going to transform the kind of jobs that can then be disconnected from the place they are in today. So for example, a factory worker, I will ignore the fact that factories evolve too, because that's a separate conversation, but assuming that factories don't evolve the same pace as they are, or they should be evolving, the worker who's sitting on the factory operating a machine doesn't have to be where he is. I mean, it could be a quality control person or something. When the person's in an immersive environment, he or she could be working from anywhere. So that is one fundamental change that will happen with the kind of jobs that get disconnected from the physicality of those jobs today. That's one. I think second thing is going to be in the sense what kind of jobs and what kind of activities get parsed out. So we've talked about things like, hey, there's a piece of code to be written. There's already organizations or groups that will break it up into small chunks and it gets done across the world. So that is already happening. But you take that to a next level, and it could be any kind of a job that potentially can be broken up into small things, tied up with this immersive, all connected capabilities. You can do them just about anywhere. So I think that significantly changes the landscape from what the jobs would look like, and also where those jobs would happen. So I think we can talk more about it, but I think those are the two things that I think of.
Great. Ravi, so what do you think? Next 2 years, next 10 years, what is going to be the big thing that's going to change how work looks like?
I'll extend his point, right? He mentioned people can be anywhere. And people will want to be anywhere. People will want to work remotely. They'll want to work from home, because people will want to be happy with their job. Now, whether the happiness comes from not driving to office and it takes you 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever, or it is just because you want to just stay at home and you probably have better internet at home than office. But they want more job satisfaction, and that's coming across everywhere, right? The reason employees in Google are kind of protesting them going to China or doing other things is because they want to be happy and proud as to what they're doing and where they're doing. So there's going to be a human aspect of it also.
Cool, thank you. Sanjeev, any opinions?
Well, I think I would like to split this in not just about the next 10 years or 15 years, but also I think the world is going to be on a two-track basis, because the kind of technologies and the differences that they make in the developed economies versus the developing economies is quite different. while we already experience the differences between the two worlds, but I think that they are actually going to get a little bit more magnified before any convergence happens. We talked about the future of work. Well, you know, these days the future of work is being written about a lot. Future of work and the future of jobs sounds like the same thing, though they're actually not the same thing. And if one were to extend that beyond, let's say, 10, 15 years to like 30 years, for example, then the scenario, I think, will begin to change a lot more rapidly than it has in the last, I would say, even 50 years. And to that extent, I must admit that while one has always, sort of thought and wished that one was younger, but I have to say that I'm really glad that I am of the age that I am now, with what the scenarios might well be. Let me start with that now.
Thank you. That's a great perspective. One was a very, very individual need, and you talked about technology, and he's talking about a social aspect of what things will be in the future. So Ashish, you talked a little about artificial intelligence, right? So how do you think that's going to affect the future of work? Are people going to be thrown out of their jobs? Is robots going to be everywhere? What's your opinion? And people have also compared this to the Industrial Revolution. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's a bit contentious like always, but of whatever little view I have and whatever relevance this view has, I don't think automation or technology will impact jobs at all. Have you not heard of this when PCs came into India and there was a huge objection to it? The thing is that the nature of jobs will change, as has been rightly talked by other people. Nature of opportunities will change for sure, but remember that ultimately, by all statistical means, we know that the GDP of the world is going to grow. Right? If it's going to grow and the population rate is going to stabilize, that means that nature of jobs will change. People will not be thrown out. So this discussion has happened when robots got introduced. It got happened when PCs got introduced. Now it's happening again. I don't see it impacting at all. It will only make life more convenient for us, and that's about it.
That's a great answer. Sanjeev, do you agree with that? A very specific question for you.
He has to disagree. That's what he wants you to do.
Very specific question for you. I've heard that programmers will become irrelevant in the future. There'll be programs who will write programs. What do you think?
Well, see, in terms of work, there is going to be definitely work of a very different kind that will come about, and the changes that we'll have to make, the way we as human beings will have to adapt to that would be a lot more and much faster. You're talking about programmers. Well, I think coding will always continue because the future of humanity is going to be algorithms, actually.
Absolutely.
So as long as there are algorithms, and there'll be more of them, more complex, programming in one form or the other will continue. But just a couple of statistics that I noted down here. When we talk of jobs and work, what percentage of this global population are we really talking about? So at the last survey, of the 7 billion people when they were, only 3 billion actually work. We talk so much about unemployment, which was sitting at 200 million. To me, it's not a huge issue, even though the newspapers and the economists make a big issue of it. Interestingly, what's actually going to be happening is that in terms of workforce, there are actually projections which says that in 10 years from now, more than 50% of the working population in the US will not be doing a job, they'll be freelancing. There is another one which actually says that at around the same time, nearly 2.5 million jobs will not be filled up. I mean, that's the kind of projections. So we actually have a big difference here, which brings me to the point of work from anywhere. So if they can't do it, we will do it. Yes. So that's the kind of scenario.
Great, thank you.
Can I share an example? Please. So it's kind of a little funny, but as you were talking about software programming stays and when people come in. So we were developing a chip that was basically used for very rapid voice processing. Right? You can actually interact with it and can talk to you. And we were working with a very large company who I refuse to name at this point in time in terms of the backend of trying to interact with them in terms of how they do the voice processing. So we had, they had a certification process, and so we created these devices in a lab in the US, and we were trying to certify it, and we realized that it would not go beyond a certain accuracy, it just wouldn't. You can do whatever tweak you do, nothing happened, read all the manuals, call up everyone, nothing was happening, right? So we called up some people, and it took about a while to figure out where does the actual person sit who's actually controlling what that backend thing does. And we realized after about a week and a half of figuring out, even in their own company, that they didn't actually know where it was happening, right? And what we realized was it was happening in a location in Europe, which is actually a big machine learning device that actually does a certification, and no one had a clue what it actually does inside that device. They had no clue. So we were like, so they were as clueless as us. They said, you know what, guys, let's keep trying. Let's see what happens, right? So we finally got it certified, but that kind of really struck on me the fact that if you're relying completely on the machine to do the work for you, no one has a clue what's going on. It finally took a bunch of people with screwdrivers to figure out what's going on and get it to work, right? So just an example of what you were talking about.
So you're saying people who know how to use a screwdriver will still survive.
Exactly.
Can I just add something which I think when I started, when I was in college, we talked of languages like OCaml, languages like Fortran, BASIC, Xenix, all of them have disappeared. But coding has not, as he rightly said. But if you look at it from a software perspective, in my opinion, I think he made a very important point. I would pay premium for people not who are good developers, but who are good algorithm guys.
Or learners.
Good thinkers.
Or the lesson. I think that is very, very key to the future. Where is this talent? How do you get people and how do you get into that zone of activity? And if you have the algorithm, you will have multiple tools to generate code for it. I mean, probably coders will go away. Guys who think and get would be the guys who will be in premium and demand.
I would actually add to that, even guys who are learners, guys or girls actually, who are learners will survive, right? Even let's take this decade, right? You had people, all the software companies wanting to pay a premium first for Android developers, then people who were data scientists, and now people are willing to pay a premium for AI and ML. Blockchain guys, right? As the technology keeps evolving, and if you want to keep getting the premium salary that you're getting, you might need to keep changing that technology, because if you're just like, okay, I'm just a .NET developer. I met somebody yesterday. He's like, I'm a .NET freelancer. And my first question was, do you still get projects, right? Coders might stay, but probably the coders who are good at learning new technologies as quickly as the new technologies keep coming out, that will become more, and that also kind of remove medium, I wouldn't, not medium, but mediocre programmers who are only good at their one language.
Yeah, that brings me to one slightly bothersome question, right? There are a lot of people who are mediocre, right? And even if you look at the Industrial Revolution, what it also ended up happening is that the people with the means, they controlled the production and the inequality grew, right? Do you see that happening in the future because of automation? Any of you?
Can you just repeat that? Sorry.
Inequality will
So there's inequality, right? Because the people who are better, so-called, as I said, mediocre programmers will be weeded out, right? Will that increase the inequality, exactly as what happened in the Industrial Revolution?
I think there is, so fundamentally we are a society of unequals. I mean, whatever people talk about, let's be flat and equal, but fundamentally we are a society of unequals. And I don't think whether any technology you bring in is going to fundamentally alter that. We are all trying, we've talked this morning, we talked to figure out how do we get the bottom to go up and the top to go down, all the blah, blah, blah. But fundamentally as a race, as a society, we are unequal by design, right? So that inequality that exists today of mediocre versus not mediocre, in my view, is going to continue to stay. It's just that as the world changes, maybe the kind of jobs change. There may be some of these very high-end, new, cutting-edge algorithm development stuff. Maybe the more smarter people do it. But you also need people with the screwdrivers to fix the machine that doesn't work, right? I mean, you need all those people too. They're all equally important, but it's just they do different jobs. In my view, people will find their own niches and they will start adjusting. That's what I think.
More specialization, is that what you see?
But it'll also come to the governments to actually make sure that that inequality does not go too far. There's a nice stat, right? In 1980, 80% of China was in poverty. Now it's only 20. Right? China has grown. As technology has grown, China also has grown. India will, I think, still have a challenge where as technology grows, we are getting better at mobile. But it's not like the middle class is growing, right? Or everybody's purchasing power is growing. If it should grow. Otherwise,
you heard something?
From a technology perspective, I'm not talking of human rights and economics and all that stuff. From a technology perspective, why not celebrate the people who are more than mediocre? Yeah, they are the ones who are driving and leading the change.
Okay.
Economically, I can understand. Politically, I can understand. Socially, I don't think there is space in innovation for making a level playing field for people who are average and mediocre and brilliant. This is being led by brilliant, and we should brilliant folks, and we should celebrate that brilliance.
I think we do celebrate them by the salary.
Whatever may be the case, but there need not be a question of they should be equal to the rest of the lot. They're the ones who are driving the change.
Let's celebrate inequality as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I would like to just add one other point on that, which is, see, inequality, which has actually been on the rise in recent times, is also about a difference in abilities. And to quite some extent, I believe that the technologies might become the equalizers to a point. And you know, whether you're talking about biotechnology or bionics, as we have seen actually in these Paralympics, you know, the kind of feats that are performed are actually incredible. So, to what extent and how fast inequality will actually reduce is difficult to say, but yes, there would be this extreme end of people who will be making stuff, but there'll be, overall, I think, a more, how shall we say, a greater equality in terms of abilities to be able to do something.
Some will be more equal, as they say, right? Okay, so that brings me to the next point, because this whole conference is about the sharing economy, right? We talked about, we didn't talk about, I think Ashish just briefly touched about, one of you said something about it, about the gig economy, right? Where the work is being split into multiple smaller components. I had a counter opinion to that. If you split work into so much little components, the kind of familiarity that you had of the work that you were doing day in and day out, wouldn't you lose that? Wouldn't you be less efficient? Is it a good thing to have work split up so minutely and distributed globally?
I think it depends, right? I'll take an example of my own company, right? Which is, and I'm talking about today, I'm not talking about 10 years from now, right? You build a chip, right? That chip has got is, these things have become so darn complex, right? I mean, when you have billions of transistors sitting in a chip, they're so complex. There would be maybe one person or two people who may even understand what the whole thing does. I would doubt it. I mean, they think they understand, maybe they don't, right? The whole thing gets passed out into so many small pieces that just goes across the world to teams across the world. There are thousands of people working on it. We've developed systems and processes, and we're not unique in that. I mean, pretty much every company does that. We build system processes that tie it all back into one whole, right? So you build all these small pieces, but end of the day, they all come together in a few months, and they come up with a chip that's one chip, right? So in my view, I think as the world evolves and as this becomes even more pervasive, we will develop, and we're already developing mechanisms where you can break it up, and you can bring it back in again without losing the big picture.
I have not seen that happening in software. Any of you have seen it happening? Yes, sir.
It's happening, right? Apple is in China, right? Software of Apple is not necessarily all written in Silicon Valley, but the hardware is built in China, right? So that distribution is already happening. Service industry, that's what we did in the service
distribution. That is a bigger kind of distribution. If you look at me as a freelancer,
yeah.
How many freelancers does Apple really employ?
Contractors,
Zero, I'm sure, right?
probably more. Yeah, freelancers probably more.
Well, so let me challenge you a minute on that, right? why would Apple, and I'm not picking Apple because I don't use Apple, but I'm using because you picked it up, so I'm going there, right?
The only one in the room to use Intel, is it?
well, maybe it's okay to use it now. It's using it. It's got Intel in it. So I think the point is, for that particular thing, the challenge happens is that our systems today are not such that I can be assured of security of my code base. Let's look at it. I mean, I'm being very in the nitty-gritties, right? I don't know if I send something out, gosh, God knows who's sitting on the other side, a guy with a black hat, and he's going to take it all and run away, right? So as we evolve, right, security and privacy is a very fundamental requirement for that to work, which means if I give something out and I parse something out, I expect the channel from me to that person or that thing and back is fully secure, where I'm sure that those things are coming back. Today, we are far from it. So in my view, that is another aspect of technology that will change how we work, because if you enable that, and if you're certain that it's secure, then your ability to be able to parse those things out becomes a lot more open, because you're more willing to take that risk. Today, you can't, because today, if it goes to my company, I don't know where it's going to go.
Or demand more for that security.
So essentially, you're saying that technology will evolve to make this happen, that, there'll be more freelancers that can be employed, provided they've been verified and vetted.
Yes.
You have anything to say?
Well, I think the projections that are there about 50% of the work being done by freelancers in the US 10 years from now probably speaks for itself.
But I don't see that happening, really, right?
It'll happen in 10 years. I mean,
I worked in software teams, right? I really can't see that happening, honestly. As you said,
so maybe you need to look at it from a different perspective. As technology keeps evolving, you can't have experts in-house continuously, and which is why you'll need to reach out to somebody. Like 5 years ago, nobody would have an AI expert, but if you needed to do something in AI, you probably have to reach out. Today, you have MLAI in-house. But let's say you're a software person and you need, let's say, somebody in human science, you'll still reach out to a freelancer because you're all technologists who are good at AI and ML.
Cool. So, Ashish, do you see, does your company employ specialists like that? Do you outsource it to freelancers?
I think it's in motion. Not true to say that it's not happening now, so will not happen. But definitely, if you look at the number of freelancers available in the market, they may be less, but as a percentage, they are far more than what they were a few years back. It's not as much as it is in US right now, but but we are obviously behind US.
You are seeing
many years. I think it'll happen. It ought to happen. I mean, if I bring something to the table, I don't want to travel 4 hours or 5 hours. I'll do it from home and do it selectively. It'll happen.
Cool, thank you. Next question I have is about the startup ecosystem as a whole. Okay, recently we have had a lot of startups coming up, and especially in Bangalore, the Silicon Valley, right? And that has kind of changed, according to me. It has even reversed the brain drain. In my time, everybody from IT used to go abroad, right? 90%. 10% used to stay back. Now it's the reverse. Only 10% go abroad, 90% stay here. So I see, to a certain extent, that the startup ecosystem has influenced the quality of jobs in India, and therefore more people are staying here. Do any of you see that happening, or do you have any opinions on that?
I'm not the best one to speak on the startup per se, but on the brain drain concept, absolutely, right? Because even if I look at my own organization, if I look at my own team, right? There was a time when if you need to get someone who's, God forbid, more than 7 years of experience on any domain, they didn't exist here, right? Because they were all sitting in, you could have conversations about the West Coast and East Coast, and what about the coast in India, never would talk about it, right? I think that's, in my view, is fundamentally altered, right? If I look at it in terms of people who, I post a job in my group, maybe at leadership level, the number of people applying to those jobs outside of this country is sometimes more than people applying for the job from within the country. I'm talking about within my own organization,
and
right?
What's the reason? Why is that happening?
I think the opportunities that people are seeing have fundamentally changed. The playing ground to some extent is leveled. You talked about the fact that how you can distribute the work. The fact is that I don't have to be sitting in an Oregon or any of our premier facilities of the past to design something, build something really cool. You could be sitting here, you could be sitting anywhere else, right? It's equal. I think that fact that you can be anywhere and get the same thing done is what's making people to start look at other avenues than just my work, because I'm physically attached to the location where I'm working. The fact that I'm physically detached from where I am, even within a company like ours, and that's true with lots of companies, I think that is opening up the avenues of people who potentially can choose to work from here or anywhere else where maybe there's a social pressure or something else.
Got it. Ravi, I'll come to you. Any of you have an opinion on this?
Well, on the startup ecosystem, one reads and hears so much, especially when one is in Bangalore. But the fact is that this startup ecosystem is rather limited when it comes to the larger country. It is really limited to Bangalore, the NCR, and perhaps to some extent Bombay. Beyond that, it's really the rest of the jobs. And talking about startups, recently I've come across at least 2 instances from the West, because the consequences of startups. So they have a startup, they want to minimize the cost, and these are guys, whose startups are sitting somewhere in North America, and this guy says, you know what, I just travel, I spend most of my time in India. Okay, so what are you doing? Well, I meet up with interesting people. Is that all? No. But the real reason is that it is so much less costly. It is, to be in India than to be there. And I have a startup, so I need to be so thrifty. So because he's thrifty, he's living his life in India. I mean, I'm coming across some really interesting examples.
But just to counter that, Chennai is the SaaS capital of India, or it's called the SaaS capital of India, and Kochi also is very popular for startups. And most states are now coming up with the startup policies. Goa is doing one, Rajasthan is doing one. So it's just not those 3 cities.
I think economic. What we end up doing, I'm sorry, I'm generalizing. We end up comparing ourselves with economies which are far richer. Here is the fact. Our per capita income is $2,500. US is $54,000. So what are we comparing? The dynamics of an economy where your average income is $54,000 to an economy which is $2,500 is going to be different. You cannot compare the state of the infrastructure, maturity, investments in US or Europe to a country which is still largely poor. Now, let's not get swayed away with IT. We are $2.5 trillion today. We were just $500 billion 15 years back. So what do we expect? It's beyond me. People are coming back because in my slide I said this is the place where the market will be. So they are coming back because more opportunities, more money, equal money, better lifestyles, except for the roads, the house, office, hotels are as good as world class. That was not the case 20 years back. Startups have been there since 1998, 99. They're maturing, they're fast better, they will take time. And for that to happen, you have to have a domestic market as well. The domestic market is just started to pick up. So I think it's just, we are work in progress. I mean, if I use that word.
I think you had some points, right?
There's a different angle, there's a different view of opportunity, right? Today, if any global company wants to actually grow, they will come to India because everywhere else it's pretty much saturated, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Google. Even Snapchat now just launched their Discover tab with 10 Indian entities. Just 2-3 years ago, I think their founder was saying India is a poor country and kind of got a lot of flack for it. But they're coming here, right? Because the opportunity is here. The growth is here. Today, if you want to grow, because the market will grow, anybody as a person also will grow because they're in the same market. So because that's there, people will come back, or you have foreigners coming here and starting up, right? You have Zoomka, you have Lizzie Chapman from Zest Money, you have Jonathan Bill.
The larger question is, has that affected how we have started working, right? The nature of work today, has it changed from what it used to be, let's say, 10 years back?
I don't think so. At least how we have, a little bit of the change has come because of global companies like Uber coming in, and Ola, of course, being there, and how you work. And WeWork also coming in, at least saying, okay, now you can work from different offices, or co-working is kind of cheaper. What has also started happening, and personally I think you have startups like Meesho or Instamojo and a few others who are trying to make sure that the rest of the society also gets uplifted, or that technology is serving them. We are just not building technology for the 1% or 5 or 10, whichever you want. You have people wanting to work for the remaining 90%, because as they grow, they become the most important consumers, or the place where you can get money from.
Okay. Have you seen startups actually affecting the way people work? Like, for example, I see a lot of co-working spaces coming up.
Absolutely. I think there is a large amount of respect for employees within larger companies, for ideas, for innovation, for work culture, for dress change, to treat and to respect ideas from youngsters, all because of the startup. It may be small, but I think the startups are having a reverse cultural effect on the larger companies, the way seniors are treating the juniors, the respect, the ideation, the collaboration, it's having a reverse effect. That's what I've seen in the last 6 to 7 years, maybe.
Yeah, no, I would agree, right? I mean, the very fact that 15 years ago or 20 years ago, you looked at someone's CV, right? And they had a gap of 6 months in between. Oh my God, something must be wrong. So you drilled in, boss, tune kya nahi kiya, right? I mean, that used to be the conversation. Right. I mean, at this point in time, I walk in at someone, looks really good, 2 years, I did something else because I felt like doing something interesting, and here's what I failed, but fine. I think that certainly is actually become a badge of honor to some extent, right? Where the person's got the risk-taking abilities, the person could think out of the box, and hey, that's the guy I need. So I think that is a fundamental change.
Absolutely.
I mean, from when we were trying to find a job to where is right now, big difference.
If there is a great guy and there's a guy from a startup, eyes folded, take the guy who's failed in a startup.
That brings me to the next
least
question.
Management overhead. He and I are equal. He'll do his job. I'll do my job. I don't have to spend time talking to him about his leave, his health. Ye nahi hai, wo nahi hai. He'll do it everything by himself.
I had a friend tell me that he'll only employ people from startups because as soon as they become an entrepreneur, the DNA changes.
Great.
The startup ecosystem has introduced a much higher threshold in terms of corporates being willing to take more risk, attempting more sort of trial and error things. So definitely, I mean, there's no doubt in every which way.
And then there's this whole millennial movement, right? Millennials today, they don't want to work in one job for more than 1 year. I've seen that happening, right? Now, is that a bad thing or is it a good thing? I mean, if I want to employ somebody, I want him to get to know my systems and the process and be, deep inside that for 5 years before I can call him really productive. That's changing, right? Is that a good thing?
So, I'm going to say something really contrarian. I don't know if that's true with millennials, just with age. I mean, fundamentally, I don't know which side I'm on because, I go look at my career at 25 years in the industry. The first 5 years of, I unfortunately wound up in management after 5-6 years of job, even though I didn't want to, but I'm a manager. Trying to hire people at that point in time. This guy will show up and say, I've got 5 job offers, and what are you going to give me, right? Then 2 years, they're going to quit and move on, right? The same people, I've been in touch with some of those guys, as their hair has become grayer, like mine have. I think somehow you settle down, is a human nature. And now, I have a feeling you have the same people who are restless about things right now. Well, let's watch how that evolves maybe 10 years from now. How many of them are still switching jobs every 2 years will be very interesting to see, right? So that's my view.
That's a good one.
I'm still switching jobs.
I think again I'm happy because companies need to learn how to motivate people besides the salary packets. So another reverse effect that the startups are having is, what should you do? And it is a boardroom discussion in many large companies. What do you do to retain people? And that's good. Because to retain good people, you need to have the right culture, the right innovation, the right balance. And finally, it has to slowly move away from per hour billing into this. You have to look at life in a very different manner. And this is the reverse effect these millennials are having. I don't know what.
No, I think I completely agree with you, Ashish. Definitely, it's an issue. It's an area of interest and concern both. Boardrooms or senior managers everywhere are forced to sort of reckon with it because, we talk about attrition, and especially in Bangalore, but at the end of the day, attrition, while it may be well about experience and salaries to some extent, but it is also about better places to work. And the other thing that I would like to introduce at this stage, since you mentioned millennials, Vasan, is that the millennials actually have a life expectancy of close to 100 years, which is going to change, so many things around us in this world. People are going to be working for like 75 years, at least. They're going to be this whole universe of geriatrics who will be geriatrics only by name, but very productive. So in terms of future of work, it'll have actually a long-term big impact from the millennials.
I'll give you another example, right? At least none of the startups that I worked with had employee engagement programs. Most of the corporates do. You don't need to engage your employees in startups. We are working there anyway, all night, all day. We wake up, we check our email, we do work. Because there's something motivating us to work for our startup, right? The problem is, as soon as that motivation breaks, people will try to find some other motivation.
I think so what I agree with you, by the way, right? So I think the other part of that, what we realize also is that the people who make decisions, some of these big companies, are at least 2 or 3 generations away from people they're managing, right? So their thought process, how they think is completely different, right? So that's another reason why you've got people who you have to have employee engagement teams to drive engagement, because they have no bloody clue what the hell the guy at the bottom wants.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So there'll be a lot of people here who would want to hear your opinions on what they should be doing, to keep their jobs or to improve their job life in the future. If you have any insights of what's going to happen, if I am X and Y kind of a job, I'm a software developer, let's say, what should I be doing?
So, just too soft. Go ahead.
Let me start, and this is something that I've been kind of personally doing because I pretty much sucked at figuring out my career early on, is actually being aware of what's happening in the market and where you can probably place yourself in that market in the future. You don't need to be right because nobody's going to be right about the future, but if you keep planning and figuring out, okay, if the market is moving in a certain way, then you also need to move with the market. You can't be a .NET programmer today.
Reskill or perish?
Yeah. But also so the thing about entrepreneurs or engineers is we don't want to think anything other than engineering, but do think of other things like management or figuring out the future in terms of where the markets are moving or where people are moving or what people need, what are the problems of the future, and then you can place yourself over there.
What would be your advice, Rahul?
I think it's the whole often cliched follow your heart, right? I mean, it's cliched, but it really works. I mean, I'm a mechanical engineer by my education, and I sucked at it, right? And so I got into mechanical for a different reason. And then I realized a year down the line that computer science is what I wanted to play around with. So I, messed up all my classes. I passed, by the way, but I was in computer sciences. I picked up a job in an IT company, and I've not looked back at all, right? The fact is that I had a family that helped me at least take what I wanted to go take, right? But the fact is that if you follow your passion and if you follow where your heart is, you can do wonders. And the opportunity that exists today is the fact, you're talking millennials and whatever words we use, I think those opportunities today are a lot more open. Because of the startup culture and stuff, people are a lot more willing to take those risks to follow their heart. I think that's what really strikes you. Because if you really pursue what you really like to do, there are opportunities, you can do wonders.
Sanjeev, any opinions?
I think the 2 words which come to mind immediately is reinventing yourself and mobility. Between those 2, anybody who's essentially adaptive, human beings are usually adaptive, let's say. So given that assumption that people are adaptive, if you're willing to reinvent and be mobile, that's just enough. I mean, there'll be a whole bunch of things in between, of course, which you will do. You'll do reskilling, you'll do the rest of it. But this is really the framework.
Thank you.
I agree with Rahul. Passion. You don't have it, you're wasting your time. This is a once in a lifetime type of an opportunity in a growing country with so much of technology disruption happening, huge amount of opportunity. And you're passionate about what you have. Money is not an issue. You could possibly be ending up making more money in Bangalore than the guys in Silicon Valley. So passion, I would go with Rahul. Absolutely.
Thank you. So that brings me to kind of a closing remark kind of question. Okay. So I want each of your opinions on this very controversial topic. Would there be a time, and if so when, that humankind will not have to work for food?
I hope that time never comes, man. Because the fact is this, right? I mean, we are fickle-minded people. I mean, at the end of the day, you create machines that do everything for you. You'll find something else to do, right? The point is, we will always be doing something else. So I don't view that. Now, maybe it'll change. Maybe my basic rotis will come from the machine, but all the gravy and stuff, all the cool stuff will have to work for it. So I'm hoping we don't have to get to the stage ever, because we'll find something else to do.
Because I was reading this interesting book called Sapiens. Okay, before agriculture was invented, there was nothing called work. Right? Will we go back full cycle to that point sometime?
If you go to Mars.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. As long as if sweet corn soup is more expensive than tomato soup, then you will actually have to work because you'll need more money for sweet corn soup.
Exactly.
Well, I think that was a good example you gave about Sapiens. So Yuval Harari has also written the other book, Homo Deus, where he really talks about the years ahead. Well, universal minimum wage is already is being piloted. People are trying it and so on. But it'll be varying as far as India, Asia, this part is concerned. Well, for long, long years, another couple of generations, there'll be more than enough work. I don't think there will be a point where people will be sitting and not required to work. But yeah, in Western countries, in pockets here and there, that'll happen.
They'll always work. That's what distinguishes us from animals. Evolution, survival of the fittest, always. We'll find something or the other, a barrier, a benchmark, break it, go deeper, higher, whatever it is. But it'll never happen that we sit at home. Never ever.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Now, I'll throw open the forum to questions from the audience.
Thank you for the session. When we look into the future of work and workplace, one of the things which companies do now when they hire or retain is to see the fitment of that person to the organization culture. When you look into the future, would this culture be still relevant? Because when you go global, etc., diversity, all that stuff we talk about, would culture be still relevant? I mean, tech companies have certain view on that, but traditional companies still look into those aspects a lot more. So what's your view on that? And is your hiring process changed in the last few years when you're looking at all those aspects? Anyone, please. Yeah. Thank you.
I can take a second go. Culture is going to be, in my view, culture is part of human nature. And so whenever you create a subsect of people from the globe, you make a smaller sect, they form their own culture, and that's the way we are. So I don't see that changing. Now, what is culture and what kind of culture an entity evolves, I think that will change as times go by. I don't see the culture aspect of that subset of people change or becoming irrelevant. That's my view on culture. So yes, my view is, as we evolve and change, whether it's the corporates or whether it is another subgroups, they will have their own cultures and they will evolve. Now, to your second question as to how our hiring practices have changed, I think we've talked about some of these right now. I mean, what we look at, like I said, right, 20 years ago, you wouldn't want someone who's highly who's taken lots of risk in their career. You would kind of find that as a negative. We love those people now because we want people who are willing to change, who can adapt really quickly to the changing circumstances. So that has fundamentally altered our hiring practices as such. I mean, I think those are the two things that I can say. I think others can add more.
Well, I would just add that I think in recent times, just to continue with what Rahul left, attitude and adaptability are the two sort of key words. Culture is something that grows. It's not really by design. It tends to be more organic. And those who come in with sort of who are adaptive and have the attitude that makes it work with everyone, that's really going to be the most important things.
Agree. Language. I'll give you a personal example. I think a large number of us were hung up on the candidates speaking in English. And then I had a very interesting experience where there was a Korean and a Japanese on a call, and I realized that many years back, I realized they don't speak English. All they need is somebody who can communicate with them in a language which solves the problem that they're solving. So why am I hung up on hiring only people who are English? So if I have a guy who comes in and is not able to speak in English, I immediately switch to the vernacular, or I get somebody who knows his local language and get him to talk. And I must tell you that people who come from tier 2 and some other states are equally good, and language is no longer a barrier. So I am okay for it. So this is not the way I was 5-6 years back, but now I just go with the guy who's not even able to speak English. Perfectly fine till he knows what he is expected to be delivered.
I think that's a very good point, Ashish. In fact, we have hired people who have not been the most articulate in English, but they're so passionate and the mind is so good So absolutely.
Yeah, hi, Samir here. As collaborative creation and consumption both increase, what do you see as the role for the large organization in the future? Do they need to exist, or can we get our work done by peers and everybody else?
Samir, can you, I wasn't very clear.
Large organizations.
Do companies need to exist in the future?
Will Intel exist is essentially
Yeah,
the question.
will Intel exist?
So
We have a job for you.
First, no, let me take a jab on it, right? Big companies will remain. They might not be so big in terms of number of people, etc., but the companies will remain because they still are a source of trust. Today, when you buy an Apple iPhone or an Intel chip, or you go for an Airbnb, because you trust what they're doing, and the trust becomes important, which is why companies will exist, because you need to...
Can tech not solve that trust?
No, tech might solve that process, but you need to connect it to something. That whether that company is a brand is a whole different thing. How do you associate, okay, this tech is different from this tech? How is Make My Trip different from some...
Yeah, I think, Samir, you're well hidden in the light. I can't even see where you are. You're right under the light. So I think maybe the question morphs into, would companies exist in the structure they are in today, right? Because that, by the way, I agree with. I mean, the companies, well, of course, there's an entity that builds trust and stuff, but the structure that the companies have, with 20, 30 years from now, as we look at a lot of these peer-to-peer technologies coming up and the world kind of going the way it is, maybe that's something that's going to alter. They may still be, they may be called something else, but they'll be like a company, but they may be structured quite differently than they are today. They're more flatter, more global, and more all-pervasive everywhere. Maybe that's the way it would be.
I don't disagree there.
Hello. I have a question. My question is...
If you're under the light, man, what did you do?
Yeah.
Sorry,
okay?
yeah, go ahead.
Now, we heard that the type of work is going to change and all that. My question is, because of automation or robotics or whatever, is the total quantum of work to be done by engineers, technologies, or human being is going to reduce, unemployment is going to increase, or impact on society? That's my question.
If Indian economy is 2.5 and it goes to $10 trillion and the population growth is just 1.2%, do you think work will increase or not? Look,
Okay.
we are not static as an economy. We are going to grow 4-5 times. So who will work? Where will they work? The population is going to be only 1.2%. This is simple maths.
No, my question was, because of automation, the robots and other people, they will do, and human being...
Nature of work will change.
The type of work.
Type of work will change. That's about it.
But overall quantum of work to be done by human beings will not reduce. Is it?
It'll have to increase for India to
Somebody
kind of...
has to create the robots.
Okay.
Let's put it another way. You know, there's a study by the McKinsey Global Institute which says that with the current technologies, the number of jobs that can actually be automated is less than 5%. Most of the other jobs will have some elements of automation. In fact, one of the things we'll all have to learn as human beings is how to work with robots. So, I mean, talking of adaptability. But I agree with what Ashish and the others said, that I think we're just going to continue doing more jobs because the work itself will keep increasing, the nature of it will keep changing.
Okay, thank you.
I saw a hand going up there.
So I have a question that's open to all the panelists and maybe slightly digressing from what the topic is. So on the one side, you have industry with its constantly changing trends and with its necessary skills. On the other side, you have a education system that's been fairly stagnant over the years. I've compared my dad's mark sheets with mine and fairly similar courses. How do you think the education landscape is going to change, say, 10 years in the future? Do you think a 4 to 5 year long program like a Bachelor of Engineering is still going to be valid?
I think that's a great question. This is we can have, I don't know, 5 hours of conversation on this topic alone, right? Did you ask how it will change? Do you think what we would like it to change to? They're two different things. It may not change much, but if we'd like it to change to a certain direction, right? So to your point about do you need a 4-year course? When we hire, let me flip it the other way. When we hire an engineer or someone in the 4-year degree course, we don't even look at what the person's core technology understanding is because they're irrelevant when they come out of college. Let's face it, whether it's IITs or anyone else, it's the same. What we look at is, has that experience given that person the ability to understand new things, ability to grasp new concepts, and ability to change and evolve? That's what we're looking at, right? That's what's coming out. So if the output of the 4 years is that change in that or that behavior of that person, then sure, we need those 4-year courses, right? But if that 4-year course is supposed to impart skills that are relevant to the time when they actually pass out, my answer is no, they're irrelevant, right? So that's the way I would look at it. Now, but the fact is that we are constantly learning, right? We are constantly learning. I mean, 20, 30 years industry, you're again learning again and again. So I think that level of education today happens across all we do, even the companies or whatever. I think that is out of the formal sector. It's not in the formal education sector, but that will continue to happen. So maybe what I guess is more and more of that is going to start getting pushed down. I mean, if you looked at your dad's mark sheet and your mark sheet, I'm pretty sure looked at the number of marks they got, they would have changed because you may be in the 90s, you may be in the 80s for the same course because there's a way our segments change for the same stuff. I mean, someone getting into a BA honors course for history with a 99% seems kind of very odd to me, but that's how it's trending. Hopefully that changes, but the system would in some shape evolve, but we do need those courses for the basic behavior of a person.
Plus, we need those 4 years to enjoy, right?
Thank you. I was not going to say that, but you.
No, but Rahul is so pertinent, but very good, interesting, fantastic question. I only wish we debate and discuss and do something about that a lot more than we are doing right now.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you. That was very interesting.
Thank you.